Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Frontline. I'm Colonel David Giammona on the Battle Ready Network and now on Roku TV's Remnant channel with Pastor Todd Coconato. Joining me today is co-host and Pulitzer Prize nominated investigative journalist Troy Anderson and the senior pastor of Horizon Church in West Sacramento, Coco Perez. Gentlemen, great to have you on the show today.
Hey, Colonel.
And on our show today is veteran actor, director, and producer Kevin Sorbo. And he's here to talk about his new movie, The Rise of the Antichrist, coming to theaters nationwide for a limited run beginning next week, January 26th. And the tickets are on sale now. Kevin, great to have you on the show.
Great to be here. You know, you got to give the main title. It's Left Behind, Rise of the Antichrist, based off the Left Behind movie, the books that sold 80 million copies.
Absolutely. Thank you for reminding me of that. And, you know, you have a great cast in the movie on The Rise of the Antichrist. You got some heavy hitters. You got Neil and Corbin, all the rest. Wow. I saw the trailer. It is a fantastic look, man.
Well, you know, it's really like an action thriller. I think people of all faiths, non-faiths, doesn't matter what political side you're on. This is a movie that really kind of fits what's going on in the crazy world right now. And the writers that from Paul Lalonde and Jessica Parker, they took it and they made it modern day. They definitely followed the book, but they changed it quite a bit because they wanted to bring in what's happening in our current world. So we talk about a pandemic, they don't name it. We talk about the crazy governments that want to have a one world government, talk about, you know, one currency. And we have one reporter, thank God, that says enough of this. Let's tell the truth. Why are we doing fake news all the time? So this movie is, it's got pretty much everything in it. And I think people will find it pretty fascinating because it deals with 6 months after the rapture and where the world is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've done a lot of faith-based movies recently, and you're going to continue to do that, I hope.
Well, you know, you call it faith-based, but I got to tell you, I think every movie is a faith-based movie because if you're an atheist, that's a pretty strong faith to believe in absolutely nothing. But it's unfortunate because they have no hope in their lives, which is kind of sad in a way. But anyway, you know, I'm going to keep making these movies. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I've got some real favorites in years past, and you did God's Not Dead 1 and 2, and you've done all kinds of those movies. And what changed in your life, Kevin? Why, in the last few years, have you kind of really just focused on the, you know, what we better call faith-based, but which we call just movies? Why now? What's going on in your life that this is all happening?
Well, really, it started more than that. It started back in 2010. This sort of goes full circle for me. I did a movie back then called What If? And that was my first unapologetically sort of faith-based movie. And it was, interesting enough, it was funded by Jerry Jenkins, who's one of the co-authors along with Tim LaHaye. Tim's passed away years ago, but Jerry Jenkins funded it, and his son Dallas Jenkins directed it. And Dallas is doing a little thing that's kind of successful right now called The Chosen. That's done pretty good. And then, you know, all these years later, well, they did. For 2014, my movie God's Not Dead came out. I was only in the first one because if you remember, I died in the first one. But that movie is by far and away the most successful of all of them because that thing was a $2 million budget, made 140 million worldwide. It was crazy. It was a great. That's where Hope and Left Behind does, and that became successful because of word of mouth and people like you that are promoting it. Because I don't have $100 million James Cameron advertising budget for his $300 million Avatar movie, so we need to rely on word of mouth. But they came out with this. We're doing the sequel from the 2014 movie that came out the same year God's Not Dead came out, but that was starred with Nicolas Cage. Well, Paul Lalonde and his company, Cloud 10, they live up there in Toronto. They own all the rights to all the Left Behind books. They got inundated with emails saying, why is Nick Cage in this movie? It should be Kevin Sorbo. So they came to me and said, hey, the next time we do the movie, we're going to do it with you. So 2 years ago, they said, look, we're going to do a big rewrite. We want to start filming this thing in 1 year. So they did the major rewrite to bring it into today. And then I directed it and starred in it with this great cast. We shot it a little over a year ago. And now it's out. And leftbehind.com, leftbehindmovie.com is where to go. We're on 1,500 screens in America, 300 up in Canada. And I need people to fill those seats up because right now we're only booked for 4 days in theaters. If we do very well, they'll get more weeks after that.
Now we're going to believe for a big run. And actually, we're going to watch the trailer in just a moment. Troy, your thoughts?
Kevin, to talk about the timing of this film, it's coming out right now. All these incredible things happening in the world, the pandemic, the Great Reset. what about the timing and the correlation there?
You know, it's perfect because we all know government's favorite weapon is fear. And we saw that certainly played out during the COVID years because church wasn't necessary, but apparently strip clubs were essential. But that's another story to talk about. When you said the timing, I think the best thing I can come up with right now is I got an amazing quote from Jerry Jenkins himself. And he said, "This is the best Left Behind movie they've ever made off of my books. And it's perfect for the time we're living in right now." So I thought that was amazing and very gracious of him to say that.
Yeah, amen. Pastor Coco, your thoughts?
Hey, I'm going to change channels here real quick if I could.
Go ahead.
What about your own personal salvation story, Kevin? How in the world did you come to know the Lord?
You know, all my life, really. I mean, I grew up typical Minnesota boy, Scandinavian, Norwegian kid, grew up in a Lutheran church, of course, St. John's Lutheran Church. And my parents were very strong Christians. So it's always been with me. I never went through any kind of phase where I was questioning the existence. All I got to do is look at the stars and go, huh, you're telling me this just happened? Something came out of nothing? Really? I just don't buy that. So
That's awesome.
There had to be somebody to start all this, just like the couch I'm sitting on. Somebody made it, right? And it's always been with me. But certainly my youth pastor was very important in my life. We had a place called The Room at my church. And every Wednesday after football, basketball, baseball practice, or whatever, we would go to The Room. It was for the 7th grade through 12th graders. And Pastor Lee, we would read out of the Bible. We would talk about life, talk about school, talk about girls. I mean, he was kind of this 24-year-old cool guy that we could sort of relate to. And he was huge in sort of that growth for me. But there was an instance during those years where the Reverend Billy Graham came to speak at the St. Paul Fairgrounds. And I know that I believe his company had a big sort of main setup in St. Paul or something. But the fairgrounds is a hot August night. And yes, it gets hot in Minnesota and very humid in August. And it was probably about 250,000 people outside. And it was a clear night. The full moon was out. And I was so moved by his speech that when he said, I got volunteers, you want to come up and pray, talk, whatever, I got up and went up there, something I probably normally would have never done at that age. And I sat down on the ground. I was talking to this guy that was probably 30, 31. And as a 13-year-old, that was like a really old guy to me, but we're talking. And all of a sudden a hand went on my head and I turned around and it was the Reverend Billy Graham.
Wow.
And he had his bodyguards with him, but his head was perfectly behind the moon. And it was like this moment, you know. And I talked about that on the Larry King show back probably about 15 years ago. And I got a call from Larry Ross, who handles all the publicity there for the Billy Graham's Foundation. He said, look, we heard about the story. Chicken Soup for the Soul is doing a book for Billy Graham. And it's the only time they've ever done a hardcover book. He loved your story. He wants you to be one of the 101 stories of meeting him and, you know, whatever he had to do and influence in my life. And so I wrote the chapter. A couple months later, the book came out and they called me up again and said, the Reverend can't get around. He's well in his 90s, but he would love it if you could promote the book for him. And I was like, show me the ticket. I'm ready to fly out right now. So very honored to be able to do that. So my relationship with God has always been there for me. I've never fallen away from that. But it was back in 2010 where I really made that decision. I want to do movies that have a bigger impact on people. God opened the door for me. That was really this is my way to harvest. And I'll tell you, I get emails every day from people and saying, I became a Christian because of your movies. And that is like the best news I could hear.
You know, Kevin, you're you know, in the movies, you're doing these great scenes, especially this new movie. We're going to watch the trailer in just a moment.
Right.
Tell us, as you're talking about your faith and what's going on in the rise of the Antichrist, what's your favorite scene in the movie? What's the most impactful scene you think that people are looking for?
You know, I directed this movie as well. I acted in it. And I hate saying this, but it's usually not a scene that I'm in, but this scene I do happen to be in. and it's with my wife, who plays someone that's, you know, all of us obviously have been left behind. My wife went because she was a Christian. My young son went because he was a Christian. I'm left with my college daughter. I love the fact that they left the college daughter still on earth, because I think if the rapture happened today, 95% of college students would probably be left behind. So their indoctrination through public schools and universities. But there's a scene when she comes into the church. And she starts talking to me and asking me questions about, you know, I've tried to believe, I've tried to do this. I know I've seen the proof of the rapture and all this. And we sit there and she's on one pew. I'm on the pew in front of her, turning back to her. And it was an emotional scene for me. And I didn't know how it was going to hit me until we actually did it. I knew it was a well-written scene, but I grew up with this painting in my bedroom. My parents put it in my bedroom as a kid. It's a very famous painting of Christ. And it's like a sunset painting. The lighting is very drastic and moving. And he's out there knocking on a door. And there's no door handle on that door on his side. So only on the other side. And I tell her that it's you that has to open that door. Jesus is not there to push himself on you. He's there for you. And if you open that door and let him into your heart, he will be part of your life. And it was really, really moving for both my wife and I. And it ended up being a scene that when we were editing it, I got all emotional watching it again. And I think it's a scene that I think is going to hit people in a very positive way.
We're going to watch the trailer right now.
Yeah.
And so let's take a look at it and we'll be right back.
If someone had told me that millions of people were just going to disappear, I, like you, would have said they were crazy.
Was it the rapture?
Yes. Yes, it was.
Are you sure? I mean, are you really sure?
I saw it happen.
Those were vanishings.
It wasn't the rapture. The rapture was debunked on the first day.
The second wave of vanishings has thrown the financial markets back into chaos.
Trust me. You want to make sure you're on the right team.
You're already teaching them the art of fake news?
I just wish I could see you one more time. Why are you still here?
Because I asked God to leave me behind.
We don't need to look for magic. They're not a bunch of religious wackos.
Wackos like my mom.
Fortunately, we have a solution. We can implement Eden Pay worldwide in a matter of weeks. Welcome to the future.
I got to look inside the Eden Pay platform, and it's a whole lot more than a glorified bank card.
So you're just admitting to being crazy.
Yes, I'm quite comfortable with that.
When it is all over, half the world will be dead.
This is the biggest news story since the vanishings.
You listen to me. You drag this line of nonsense into the public eye. We're both finished.
Now I'm more like an actor.
The Antichrist will declare himself as God.
Seemed like a stretch even for them.
How do we know who we can trust?
Trust God.
The world is suffering. We are on the brink of mass insanity.
What happens to the rest of us?
Doesn't it seem strange that it's still so easy to dismiss it, even though we saw it with our own eyes?
So Kevin, as we watch the trailer, and I've seen it a few times, there's some powerful, you got Neil playing the Antichrist.
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't.
Maybe he is.
Oh yeah, maybe it is. But you couldn't ask for a better actor, man. Those eyes, they just pierce your soul. I'm just kind of curious, a little bit off the script, but on the script too. How did you get Neil to come in and do this movie? What was his vested interest? Is he a believer, or he just want to do something that was interesting in science fiction and a thriller?
Well, Neil is a believer. In fact, he's taking a lot of flack right now because he has refused to do any sort of sex scenes, even kissing scenes with any other women in his movies because of his wife and the kids that he has. He says, I'm not going to do that. So they're attacking him for that, which is really weird to me. But that's the world we live in right now. It's like, you better live the way we want you to live. It's not the way you want to live. It's very strange. But I call him up. We've been friends for years. I've always wanted to work with him. And I said, Neil, I got an amazing role for you in this movie. I'm going to send you the script. And he called back immediately after reading it and said, I'm in, Kevin. I am in.
Wow.
And he actually sent me a script that he and his director partner wrote that we're hoping and praying we can raise money for it. Because Yellowstone is so hot right now, Kevin Costner's series.
Right.
He has a modern day, when I say modern day, it's 1860s, but it's modern day Cain and Abel. And we're going to play brothers in it. Wow. And Neil already said, he goes, for a change, he said, you're going to play the bad guy. I'm tired. I've been killed 51 times. I'm done with that. And I said, I'm fine with that. I played the atheist college professor in God's Not Dead, so I'm used to it. And then I always say, I'm sorry, I said atheist college professor. That's redundant. I played the college professor. That's all I got to say. That pretty much covers it.
Amen. Troy, you had an opportunity to interview Kevin for our upcoming book. And Kevin, thank you for, talking to Troy about that. But Troy, in that zone, what's your thoughts, your question for Kevin now?
Yeah, Kevin, thank you for doing an interview for our book and also for the Newsmax article that's coming out here. One thing, you've been very outspoken in recent years, but what kind of reaction have you got from people in Hollywood, and what kind of encouragement would you give to other actors and people in entertainment industry that are believers?
Well, I love to say that Hollywood loves me. So that's kind of like, we're the new in the closet. It used to be the gays in the closet. Now it's the Christians, conservatives in Hollywood that are in the closet.
Oh, wow.
And they need to not be afraid anymore. Because I've had people walk up to me on movie sets, whether they're actors or camera operators or whatever, and say, hey, thanks for being a voice for us. And I go, why don't you be a voice for yourself? And as far as what it's done for my Hollywood career, no, Hollywood booted me out about 10 years ago. My manager and agent said they couldn't work with me anymore, which I found interesting because I go, wait a minute. You guys are the ones that are always screaming for tolerance. For decades, they've been screaming that way. Freedom of speech, right? And all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's a one-way street. Oh, I get it now. And it's really sad to me because I, honest to God, I do not harbor that anger and hate towards someone who has a different viewpoint. I just don't. I'm more than willing to have a conversation with any atheist, any agnostic, any person that's a liberal. I'm more than happy to have a chat and say, tell me how you think the way you think, and I'll tell you how I think the way I think. But it's weird. All they have on that side is anger and hate and violence and creating more divisiveness. And Hollywood's leading the way. I mean, Andrew Breitbart, who was a dear friend of mine, rest in peace. He said at first, I mean, for me to hear it was politics runs downstream from culture. Who runs the culture? Hollywood does. I mean, Walt Disney said it back in the 1950s that movies and television will influence our youth. Well, I think that's a pretty true statement, what he said, because we see what has been happening even since the 60s. When you look at the 60s, you got the Vietnam War, you got the Civil Rights Act, you got the free love, hippies, you got the really birth of rock and roll, heavy rock and roll, and all these things. And what Hollywood did was start making the anti-hero, the bad guy, the good guy. I mean, I'm sure you've seen Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, great movie. Butch and Sundance, they didn't look like Paul Newman and Robert Redford. They weren't that quick with their dialogue. These were bad guys that killed people, but they glorify these guys and they glorify their lifestyles. And they have trading cards out there of mass murders now that people buy up. I mean, it's absolutely insane what we're doing to the world right now.
Pastor Coco, from the spiritual biblical standpoint, you got any questions, thoughts for Kevin on the new movie and his own personal life?
Well, I thank God for you first, Kevin. Man, you've been a real witness for Jesus Christ out there in nowhere land. But you know, the verses about the rapture in 1 Thessalonians, I believe, chapter 4, verse 17, and then chapter 5, verses 1 through 8 of the same book, and it very clearly points out that there is going to be a taking up, a rapture. How did you know this at the beginning? I know this is not popular with Lutherans. Nothing on Lutherans. Okay, I love them all. But I mean, this is not a popular teaching with Lutherans.
Well, I kind of fell away from the Lutheran following, and it wasn't really on purpose. I just found a church that was non-denominational for many years. But for the last 14 years, I've been with a Calvary church now.
Gotcha.
My pastor is still, as far as I'm concerned, is Pastor Rob McCoy, based in Thousand Oaks there. And I love Rob. He works a lot with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA. And I remember when I started going to his church, we still watch his live feed here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the 11 o'clock services there. We go to our church here up in Jupiter, but when we're back home after lunch, we all get, we stand up with the people in there, and we do the same thing like we're actually at church. And Rob said, I'm not afraid to work my congregation down to a manageable size. And I love that line, because I think what's happened right now, we have a lot of woke pastors out there. And I do a lot of speaking events. Mostly I do Christian education events. The majority actually is pro-life speaking events. And I also people, because I know I got men of the cloth, women of the cloth that are out in the audience, and I say, you people need to remember you work for God. You don't work for government. And there's such a fear right now, and fear, like I said, is such a great weapon, that so many churches are even unwilling to work together. That's just sad to me. And I wish I had an app that went to every religious leader in the country and say, look at the movies that I'm doing. Look at the movies that Irwin Brothers are doing. We need all of you guys to support these little movies, because I don't have the big budget to have my trailer in every football or basketball game. We need people like you guys right now, what you're doing at FrontLine, to get the word out there, because we need to fill up the theaters. We only got 4 days with this movie, as I said, and we need to fill it up, because then we'll get extra weeks if we fill it up. And people need to support this movie, because this movie has so much going for it, and there's so much that is really relevant to what's happening in today's world.
Absolutely. We're going to put this out there in every channel we have out there. And, I talked to Mel Gibson a few years ago. He was out here at Fort Benning when I was on active duty, and he was making the We Were Soldiers movie. And he talked to me about a faith-based movie that he was going to make with Jim Caviezel, talking about the crucifixion. And now he's got a new one coming out. What is there are Hollywood actors out there you talk about who are doing movies about the Bible, who maybe love God and all that. Are you doing fellowship with these women and men and women, fellow actors? And do you guys have any get-togethers and talk about, hey, how can we influence the culture? Do you do any of that kind of stuff?
Well, I'm not in Hollywood, so I'm really not there anymore.
Right.
There was a group at one time we got together, and it was called FOA, Friends of Abe Lincoln, our first conservative you know, because in the gay community, they go Friends of Dorothy, like Wizard of Oz, to find out if you're gay or not. So we said, well, let's go Friends of Abe. We'll do Friends of Abe. So we had a group that built up to about 2,600 strong. But in here, there's a Wednesday group here that I go to. It's very wealthy business guys. And we're now actually trying to work together, doing some kind of a film fund with me to get the word out there. Because a lot of people don't realize we got a cultural war to fight here. And Hollywood is beating our butts, pardon my French, but they are winning that war right now. And we see the agenda, the things they push on every movie and every television show. And you think they get the hint when a movie comes out like Tom Cruise's Maverick, a Top Gun sequel, which was a massive hit. And if anything, there was no really agenda other than, maybe saying, hey, the strength of American government, the strength of American military, something like that. But there was nothing beyond pushing this agenda, that agenda. It was just a movie that people really enjoyed. And you think they would take that as a hint to do more movies like that. I got invited when the Noah movie came out, if you remember the Noah movie at all.
Right.
All right. So my wife and I got invited to a special screening at Paramount, okay? Halfway through the screening, my wife looks at me, she goes, this has nothing to do with Noah, because they painted him as a sort of just a psycho guy that was an alcoholic that was hell-bent on destroying his family once the trip of the water was over, once that they landed on finally some dry land. And my wife says, this isn't Noah. This is Waterworld meets Transformers with the rock angel.
That's
and I
right.
said, you watch what's going to happen. The faith people will flood this movie because it's Noah. And they're going to walk out going, wow, that was horrible. And what happened? I said, it's going to drop 60% from week 1 to week 2. It dropped 67% because of bad word of mouth. They lost over $100 million on that movie.
Hey, wow. You know, we're coming to the end of the show, and I know your time is limited. Troy and I, Coco, will be at the NRB where the Jeekins were out there last year. Maybe we'll hope to get to see you out there. We'll have a booth and all that, and we'll promote, everything that's going on with you and all your movies, not just this one. So we're excited about that. But, as we're running out of time, Kevin, tell us, when people see this movie, what do you hope they'll take away from it? What do you want them to carry?
I hope they walk out, not only have a conversation about it, but they open their Bible and read the book of Revelation. As my pastor used to say, read that book, it'll scare the hell out of you. And I think that people will be curious, and hopefully that makes them want to read more of the Bible. But I hope it's a movie that's all the movies I do. I hope it's something that sparks conversations instead of coming out of a Avengers movie, which are fun, whatever it may be. But it's like great, it's like a roller coaster ride because of all the visual effects. This is a movie with real actors talking about real situations, talking about real people. And I think I do movies that have people can relate to. People might remind them of themselves or somebody they know. But I'm hoping that people will have the conversation. And I'll tell you what, I know it's tough to ask somebody to come to church with you if they're an atheist or agnostic, because there's church people, I don't want to go there. But to ask them to come to a movie, it's an easy thing to do, to ask people to come to a movie. And hopefully that
Great idea.
will fill up these seats.
Anyway, any last words, Kevin, for our audience before you go?
Don't let anyone set your limitations. I think the biggest people who hold themselves back are themselves. And I think you got to, we all hit roadblocks in life, and how you react to that roadblock will define the kind of person you are. Instead of blaming God or blaming a God you don't believe in, or blaming family, the world, the government, look in the mirror and say, okay, this happened to me. What am I going to do about it? How am I going to make my life better? How am I going to make my life better for other people? And that'll make a big difference for the rest of the world. Trust me.
Well, Kevin, thanks for your time. I know you're extremely busy. We're blessed to have you on here today, and thanks for coming. And we're going to continue to pray and ask the God to open up all the doors of heaven to bless this movie. And ladies and gentlemen, I just have one question for you. Are you battle ready?